What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new Sunday Super Debacle. Yes, that's right. The big game is supposedly starting or has started. I don't know. I don't care. I'll be honest with you. The Dolphins are not in it again, um, and they haven't been in it since the '80s. So I haven't cared about the Super Bowl since the '80s. Um, I care even less about Taylor Swift or Kendrick Lamar. Um, but I do care about music. And so what I'm deciding to do for this Super Bowl, it came out of a discussion that was had when I was recording an episode of Deprogrammed. So first, I'm going to tell you about Deprogrammed, and don't forget to give me a like or something. Let me know that you guys are in the studio, that you're listening to the show. I'm going to start talking about the program. Then I'm going to get into the main topic of what I plan to talk about, because today's going to be music centered, um, as I drink my good old Cola Champagne. This is a soda that I used to drink growing up. It was big in the Puerto Rican communities. Um, uh, it's super, super, super sweet. This can has 57 carbohydrates. It's more than a Big Mac. Oh my God, it's so tasty. So anyway, make sure that you guys sit there, give me a reaction. Let me, say something in the chat, so I know that you guys are alive and kicking and watching. And I want you guys to participate in today's discussion. And the way you're going to participate is through the comments. So check this out. What we're going to talk about. So, I don't know if you guys know Justin Wilson, good friend of mine. If you ever listen to the Mike and Bob show, he was the guy who was known as the Hulkster. Well, he does a show called Deprogrammed. It's a great podcast, available on the Apple and iTunes and all the rest of that crap, um, uh, Spotify. And essentially, the gist of the show is, um, you get a bunch of people, three, four, sometimes five, and you take a group and you come up with this discography, right? And each member of that group comes up with 20 songs. And then together the group will come up taking the lists of 20 songs that they have to come up with a list of 10 songs to hand over to somebody who's never heard the group, never been a fan, and say, hey, these are the 10 songs you need to listen to so that hopefully you can get into the group, right? So four of us got together, and we did the band Rush, right? And Rush, and we came up with a top 10. I'm not going to go and tell you about it. That's for when the episode comes out late in March. But Justin does something called After the Fact, right? So we do the show, records the show. The show's done. Then everybody who's there, who's hanging out, starts to talk. And normally we talk about the show, but then it goes on to different things. And this time, it went on to iconic moments in rock history. And I started thinking about that. And I said, you know what? That'd be something that'd be awesome to talk about today. Uh, and so what I want to do is, first of all, I want to make sure that you guys are liking, giving me some kind of reaction, or at least giving me a comment, so that this way I know that you guys are here and that you guys are checking it out. And I know some of you are going to be distracted by the game. Cool, whatever. I don't have the game on in here because I want to make sure I do this. I'm going to do this to 8. Then I'll go see whatever hell's happening because I don't really give half a damn. Um, and I know some of you guys don't care about the game at all. Some of you have it on in the background. Um, but I want you guys to participate in this. And so what I'm going to do is I came up with a list of 18 different moments in time, um, in popular music that have affected music culture history today. Okay. Now I had a couple rules. Um, I Number one is it had to be after 1950 because there was I could add some things like the creation of the phonograph. A lot of lists that I saw um, when they talk about uh, the most iconic moments in music history would mention like Beethoven's ninth. I mean, that's how some of these lists were constructed. And to be honest, the guy hadn't done anything for 12 years, comes back, gets the largest orchestra of the time, and then goes on to host to do the symphony deaf, completely no ability to hear. That's kind of an iconic moment, yeah. So, but for mine, it had to be number one. Um had to be from 1950 on. Okay. Number two, I had to limit the number of deaths and suicides because of the fact that those are their own lists. Also, the number of that was the main thing. I also limited the number of concerts because concerts could be its own list. But I tried to take some of the more iconic ones, okay, and how they affected history. Okay, so it's not just that it was a concert, but it was a concert that affected culture, that affected history, essentially. Okay, so I'm going to get ready to start. But before I start, I want to remind you guys again, make sure that you give me some kind of reaction so that I know you're listening. Give me a comment. Say what's up. See if you agree or disagree with any of the ones that I'm going to say. Okay. I've gone through a bunch of lists. I've checked out a bunch of different things. I'm going to say these, and I'm not going to say them in chronological order. They're not in any particular order. Okay. So, iconic events in the history of music since 1950 and how it ended up shaking our culture. Okay, how it affected history. I'm going to start with the first one on my list, the Rolling Stones concert at Altamont Speedway in 1968. This concert was significant because it is considered the end of the Summer of Love. So in 1960, excuse me, that was 1969. I said 1968. 1968 began the Summer of Love, the hippie movement. Everybody, oh, kumbaya, let's all love and hold together. And you had these incredible concerts where people would get together and they would just, hippies, right? So it all came up to this event at Altamont Speedway in 1969, this concert that was hosted by the Rolling Stones. Now, it wasn't just the Stones, but you had Santana, you had the Grateful Dead, you had other bands that were there. And it got off to a bad start. Okay, it got off to a bad start because they couldn't find a place to hold the venue. I mean, they couldn't find a venue to hold the concert. So when they finally did, right, and it was the Stones who did it. The Stones were under a lot of pressure because they were touring. They were supposedly they were overcharging people, so they said we'll do this free concert. They couldn't find a venue. They didn't find a venue. They got the show getting ready to start, and they needed security. So who did they hire? The Hells Angels. And the Hells Angels, the Hells Angels were the Hells Angels. The vibe got so bad that Grateful Dead didn't perform. They were just like, we don't need this, we're out. So now the concerts, obviously, people who are there to see the Dead, they're not there. They give up. Stone, the Hells Angels are supposedly being paid in beer, so they're drinking, they're being rowdy. Eventually, what happens is um, a concert goer supposedly breaks out a gun. Hell's Angels do what they do. Concert goer is dead, dies right there near the stage. Actually, a couple other people actually died during the concert, but that was the big thing because the person was allegedly murdered by the Hells Angels, who were there acting as security. This this is significant because this is really the start of the end of the summer of love. It's the realization that um, society is even when you get a bunch of like-minded people, it's not going to be all love and hugs and kisses. There's going to be violence. There's going to be people who don't care. So I listed that one, and it is again extremely significant in the history of music. Tell me if you agree or if you disagree. And again, remember, as you guys are listening, if you're listening, hit a reaction button so I know that you guys are there. Next one that I'm gonna bring up is a significant one for people around my age, right? Us Generation Xers, and that's in 1981, the launch of MTV, the introduction of the music video, music going visual. Um, this is significant because you know what? This meant where uh, looks began to matter. If you notice, or if you look at bands before the MTV era, there was an emphasis on talent. You know, exception to teeny boppers. Teeny boppers always have to be, the Osmonds, the Jackson Five, all of those teeny bopper music. And believe me, the Jackson Five was every bit of a boy band, as much as NSYNC was. They were there to attract the teens, the young teen women. But you didn't have to look good to rock, and you can see it by a lot of the 70s acts, and those guys, some of them were rough, right? But once MTV came on the scene and things got visual, now you had to look good. And it really did affect music, and it affected um, who could break in and who could break out, because now you couldn't look rough, and doesn't matter how talented you were, you had to look good. Now, um, so that was the negative part of it and how it affected looking. The positive part was that now you had the ability to make your music visual, to add images and colors and sounds and shapes to music, which before then, the only time anybody ever really got that far into music, the average person, unless you went to a concert or saw a concert movie, um, uh, was if you took acid. And then music was, music is music, yeah. Um, uh, but yeah, so the second thing on the list is 1981 and the launch of MTV Music, MTV, the channel. Let's go to one. I'm going to skip this one because this one's going to be a little bit more important here in a minute. But I'm going to go now to 1965, and one of the um, one of the biggest things in music history happened at the Newport Folk Festival, um, where Bob Dylan comes out on stage. Bob Dylan, who had been the folk darling, the voice of a generation, um, uh, call him what you want. He was at the Newport Folk Festival in '63 and in '64, and worked his way up to headline the Newport Folk Festival in 1965. And he comes out with a Fender Stratocaster electric guitar and plugs it in, has the Paul Butterfield Blues Band backing him, and Dylan Goes Electric. Yes, Bob. I'm salesman. Correct. That's for Cigar Bob, who was part of the Rush of the whole Rush program. But Dylan Goes Electric, and it kind of signifies the end of the folk music genre, which was pretty big, and kind of welcomes. It officially welcomes electric music being plugged in, even though, of course, you had it before Dylan. But in 1965, the significance of him plugging in cannot be understated as to how it affects music culture. So we're going to knock that one out. The next one that I want to go to, 1 year before, on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Beatles come on there, and Beatlemania goes wild. 73 million people tune in to watch the Beatles play. And it's the beginning of the British invasion. It's the beginning of it's ushering in a new era of music into the United States, which ends up dominating. It ends up dominating the airwaves. The Beatles were the first band, and mind you, this is in the day before digital streaming, right? To hold the top 5 spots in the Billboard top 40 at the same time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is not, again, in a day before digital streaming, because digital streaming allows you to purchase an album one track at a time, right? So all tracks are actually being charted. Hence why gold records and platinum records and diamond records are not what they used to, or don't mean what they used to mean before the digital scene comes on. But for the Beatles to have the top 5 tracks means that you had to release 5 singles. 5 singles had to have been being played on the radio at the same time, and had to have been so popular enough to have charted. So that's the significance of the Beatles and what they did for modern music. And to go on Ed Sullivan and on the Sullivan Show, and in front of 73 million people, welcoming the British invasion, definitely affected music. And one of the things that's also significant about that is, by opening up the British invasion, the Beatles brought in bands that were blues based, because England respected the American blues more than the American bands did at the time, right? So you had the Rolling Stones, you had the Paul Butterfield band, you had Cream, you had all of these, the Kinks, the Who, all of these bands who loved the American blues, who respected Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson and Bo Diddley and all of these other blues players. And so there became a huge interest in the blues again. And it's because of the British invasion, which we'll bring back to, because of the Beatles playing on Ed Sullivan. Let's jump to 2021. There's a lot of people right now who are watching the Super Bowl, and who every now and then they're going to show a picture of this young lady, and people are going to, a lot of us are going to be like, oh God, but a lot of people are going to be really excited. And we're talking about Taylor Swift. Well, in 2021, Taylor Swift does something which not only brings awareness to this plight, but also elevates her to a whole new level. She releases the album Fearless, Taylor's version. So Taylor Swift had lost all the music rights to to all of her albums to the record company. And the way for her to be able to get that money back or to make some money is to go and re-record all of her albums. And so up to that point, all under Taylor's versions. And she put a spotlight on how talent was being manipulated and was losing out. You know, taking advantage of young green people who are breaking into the industry. And this isn't the first time that a spotlight is put on it, but it was a bold move for such a young lady, but a talented young lady, and to say that, okay, you guys hold the rights to my masters, but that doesn't mean I can't re-record them. And by re-recording them, she got all the money. She got, of course, you know, she had to pay for the rights to sing them, but she was able to go and bring a lot of attention to herself. This is the kind of thing that eventually leads to the Taylor Eras tour, you know, and her being the big thing. But like I said, it's not the first time that we see something where an artist does something to bring attention to the fact that record companies are screwing them over. In 1995, as a matter of fact, we have one of the biggest artists of all time, one of the most iconic artists of all time, Prince, who believes that he's a slave to the record labels, who are holding him back and telling him what he can and can't do. So what does he do? He changes his name to Love Symbol Number 2. That's the official name of that symbol. And he becomes an artist formerly known as Prince. And he brings a lot of attention to the fact that record companies have been screwing people over for years. And in this case, they were screwing him, and he was going to do something about it. So both those things, 1995, Prince changing his name, and 2001 with Taylor Swift releasing Taylor's versions of her songs, of her albums, really highlight and start to change what's happening in music as far as people being able, artists being able to control and make some of their money back. Let's see. Let's go. We're gonna do two here, both involving Woodstock, right? 1969, Hendrix playing. Well, first of all, the Woodstock Festival was this whole great thing, the culmination of the Summer of Love, actually, even though Summer of Love was 68. But 1969, 100,000 people come down on Bethel, New York, and Max Yasgur's farm, and we have Woodstock, right? Where early that Monday morning, Hendrix plugs in and plays the Star Spangled Banner, electric version of the Star Spangled, and it's incredible because you get to hear, as a lot of people who've described it, you get to hear the love that Hendrix has for this country, mixed up with the raw emotion and anger and confusion of us being in the Vietnam War, and it comes doubly. It doubles its meaning for the fact that Hendrix was a veteran. A lot of people don't realize that, but Hendrix had served in the armed forces. I believe he was in the Army. He might have been in the Air Force, but I'm pretty sure he's in the Army. And so Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner is one of these moments in musical history that that really helps to shape culture. The opposite end, the 30th anniversary of Woodstock, 1999, and we get a completely different vibe, right? In 1969, we get 100,000 young people coming in, all wanting to celebrate love, and all the music wanting to peace come together. And in 1999, we have the complete opposite. The riots at Woodstock um, show that you can't go back, right? We've become so society has de-evolved. The youth of today, they didn't want to get together and love and hug and hold flowers. No, instead they rioted. They stole. They looted. Um, in some cases, there were reports of sexual assaults that had happened. Nobody was safe. Nobody was safe. The National Guard had to be called in order to disperse people. Um, and that put a sour note on society, put a sour note on the youth, um, which it was a memorable event, but for all the wrong reasons. And again, that's the 1999 Woodstock concerts, 30th anniversary. Let's see. Let's go. And again, guys, man, hit a reaction button. Let me know that you guys are there. If you're there, I know Bob stopped in for a second. I don't know if he's still there or not. And I know Amanda is taking a quiz because she's in school, so she'll hop on when she's done with that. But the rest of you guys, if anybody's tuning in, feel free to drop in, see if you're agreeing with this list so far. If you're not agreeing with it, let me know what you're thinking. Let's move on. Let's see, what should I do? Let's go to 1976 in a little pub in Manchester, England. We have a band who's playing who shapes British music, and also what's going on there. I also, by shaping the British music scene, ends up shaping America, and that's the Sex Pistols playing at this little club in Manchester. The significance of it is the fact that not that the Sex Pistols played, but who was in the audience at that time, and how it affected British music, which in turn affects American music, right? You had members who would go on to form Joy Division. You had members who would go on to form the Smiths. Most importantly was Morrissey, who was at that show. Susie Sue of Susie and the Banshees was at that show. I believe Adam Ant was at that show. So you had some members of what would come after that initial punk wave who would form new wave, of course, redefined punk, would form goth, would really form genres of music in the UK that would come back to affect the United States and to affect our culture. Hey, you look at a lot of you young people, a lot of you punk kids, but a lot of you guys who listen to music today, your music comes out of that Smith's, Joy Division, Susie and the Banshees era, right? Especially if you're into emo and if you're into pop punk and you're into any of that kind of stuff, that all comes right out of that. And that doesn't happen if the Sex Pistols don't play um, that concert. So 1976, Sex Pistols play Manchester. Let's go. And again, tell me if you guys are agreeing with this. And if you're listening, make sure that you give me a reaction so I know that you're there. Right now, I believe I'm talking to just Ike and to Bob. And that's cool. I'm having a good time with them. But I want to know if any of you guys are there. Yeah, but you know what? You say punk was already a thing in America, but it wasn't anywhere near what the Sex Pistols were going to do. Punk, if you look at the bands that were considered punk, well, you had Iggy and the Stooges, and you had the MC5, and of course the Ramones, right? But punk really was coming out of New York, out of CBGBs, and so you had more. It was more artsy to me than it was the aggressive punk of the Pistols, and the Clash and bands like 999, the Stiff Little Fingers, and that kind of stuff. It was more artsy. It was the Talking Heads. Blondie was more artsy. Television. Richard Hell and the Voids. You had some aggression, but all of it was more theatrics, intellectual. The Sex Pistols were FU, you know. So that to me was the difference, because I thought about putting the Ramones playing at CBGB's as a punk representation, but I really think that the Sex Pistols playing that show in Manchester '76, and I even looked at when the Sex Pistols did their tour of America in '77. I don't think a band lasted as short a time and had as much of an impact in music as the Sex Pistols, who I believe were only around for like 3 years, 76, 77, 78. They put out one legitimate album, never mind the Bullocks here, the Sex Pistols. That was the only full album that they did. And in that time, those 3 years, they really tore apart music. They really, really did. Their music brought an end to arena rock, which hadn't even come into its full form yet. And yeah, they were probably one. I would say the Sex Pistols were probably definitely one of the top 10 most significant bands. The Texas show is really it's the antithesis of the Sex Pistols, their reputation, everything. And they had a couple of they were on the Dick Cavett show, and Dick Cavett did an interview with them, and just the disdain that they came across, and the I don't give a crap attitude. Let's go, and I'm gonna mention a couple of things that I believe again significant, and we can tie them in together. Okay, we'll start in January of 1959. Young guy named Barry Gordy Jr. Founded Tamiya Records. Tamila, I can never pronounce it. TAMIA, which would in 1960 go on to become Motown. The creation of Motown, the Motown sound, the hits, the bands, iconic bands that will come out of Motown, Temptations, Four Tops, Martha and the Vandellas, Smokey Robinson, the Miracles, people like what's his name, Sitting on Dock of the Bay. No, that wasn't him. Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. These people, not only did they come out with an incredible sound, that Motown sound coming out of Detroit, Michigan, but they made it cool and openly acceptable for white people to like black music. You know, they really put it out there in front of you. And they did it with style and grace and smooth moves and incredible harmonies. And up until that time, when Motown really started to take hold, which I would say is probably about 62, 63, you know, there are people who are liking black artists, of course. Bo Diddley, who got mentioned, and Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino, but it's still looked down upon, because rock and roll completely was looked down upon, right? Even the Jerry Lee Lewises and the Elvis Presleys were looked down upon. But as you start to get Motown, and Motown becomes more popular, you start to see an influx of African Americans, of black artists coming into getting more airplay on white stations, getting more white people going to their concerts. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not all peace, love, and let's hang out and you know, hugs and kisses, but we start to see a more acceptance of that kind of music, of African American music, of black music, and so the founding of Motown is an extremely significant event in history, in music, and in popular culture. Let's fast forward 25 years, and there's a show on TV, the 25th anniversary of Motown, and one of the most incredible things, which probably, if we had the internet back at this time, back in 1983, this probably would have been the first viral video, if it would have happened, if we had that capability at the time. And that's Michael Jackson moonwalking across the stage. Not the first person to ever do it, but when you add the flash, you add his moves, his signature swagger, and the popularity of the Thriller album, which was out, and he was doing Billie Jean. He does that, and it changes music. Again, MTV had just come out. Hey, honey, I'm glad that you're here. I'm sure you got 100 on your test, because you're amazing. It's again, it's a tailor-made moment for the MTV generation, the visual generation, the generation that needs to see good-looking and flashing moves and sparkles and all of that stuff. That really affects music going forward, and the presentation of music going forward. Let's see. Again, if you guys have any, Ike, because you seem to be the only person here that's acknowledged, you and Bob, and I know Bob has got other things going on. He's at home with his kids. But if you got any other things that you want to go and throw in there to really get into the discussion about this music, man, please throw them in the chat so we can talk about it. I'm going to give you two. Well, I gave you one already. Television moment with the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. But let's go to 1956. The Milton Berle Show. And this young artist who had been on television before. As a matter of fact, had been on Milton Berle before, um, was not allowed to be filmed below the waist. His moves were so provocative. His hips was the way he moved his hips and shook them was so provocative, so controversial that they didn't show him. They could only show him from the waist up, not from the waist down. And we're talking about Elvis Presley appearing on the Milton Berle show. It's his second time on the show, but this time he's doing a version of Hound Dog, and he's not hiding behind a guitar. And the camera is showing him. The camera is showing him and all of his moves. That's the performance that led him to being called the King of Rock and Roll. And as many people, as many young kids who saw him, all the boys wanted to be him, all the girls wanted him. You had people who were outraged by his blatant sexuality of his moves. Now, mine is 1956, so Elvis's wiggling wouldn't even raise an eyebrow today. But at that time, yeah, it blew the roof off of the place. Let's see, where am I going to go to? Let's go to 1959, and you know there had been a lot of deaths that happened in music. Everything from drug overdoses to plane crashes to suicides to murders to car crashes, but nothing affected music like what is commonly yes, keep that pelvis far from me. Sad, who was it? That was from Greece. I can't remember her name. Elvis, let me be. Keep that pelvis far from me. But in 1959, we have what's affectionately called the day the music died. And it was a plane crash coming out of a concert where Buddy Holly, J.P. Richardson, who was known as the Big Bopper, and a young Richie Valens, who we'll say loses a flip to Waylon Nelson, and ends up getting a seat on that plane. Waylon Jennings was supposed to be on that plane. Rizzo, thank you, honey. Waylon Jennings was supposed to be on that plane. He flips a coin for Richie Valens to get the seat. Richie Valens gets it. Waylon doesn't. Plane crashes, and we lose three incredible talents. Affectionately, again, known as the day the music died. And of course, I've got all that here, and I forget to put the actual date of it. I can't remember offhand, but it affected us, or it affected the country because it really was the loss of innocence. Three young talents. Again, the music at the time was full of hope, was full of innocence, of young love, and wiped out in an instant. It really shocked the nation. It made people realize that you're not here for a long time, and it could all go away that quick. So I got that as one of my events that have happened since 1950 that have affected our culture. Let's go. Let's see. February 3rd. Thank you, John. I knew, and you know what? I knew it had just happened recently. We just celebrated the 50, 60. Is it going to be? Oh my God, 60 minutes, 40, 40. The 63rd? I mean, 67th, 68th? What is this? This is the 66th anniversary of that last week. For 66 years. Wow. Wow. When you think about it. And again, this is music that has shaped everything that you guys listen to today. Let's go. I don't have too many iconic performances, concerts. I didn't put too many concerts here, because there were so many, you know. But one of the ones, a concert, which is culturally significant, was the Moscow Monsters of Rock Festival in 1991. As the Soviet Union is desperately trying to hold on to communism, and it's crumbling at their feet. A bunch of metal and rock bands, AC/DC, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, all go over to Mother Russia, and they play a concert for free that ignites the youth of Russia to say no more to communism, and plays a big hand in the fall of the Soviet Union. When you talk about the power of music, there's a good example of it right there in that Monsters of Rock Festival happening right there. Soviet army trying to stop it, couldn't. Can't stop the rock, baby. Can't stop the rock. And at another festival, which was iconic in its own right, we have an iconic performance from an iconic band. And in 1985, coming out of the We Are the World and the Do They Know It's Christmas records to raise money for the famine in Ethiopia, we have one of the most ambitious concerts of all time, and it's Live Aid, right? The significance of it is two concerts happening simultaneously, one in England, the other one in Philadelphia, right? And they're there to raise money and to raise awareness, to help those in Ethiopia, to help those around the world. Incredible performances. Phil Collins, the only performer to perform both in England and in the United States. You have the reunion of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. You have the reunion of Black Sabbath with Ozzy at the helm. You have the reunion of Led Zeppelin. And you have an iconic performance from a band that was huge in the 70s, and at this point was getting regulated to the also rants. People don't like to admit it or say it, but by the time 1985 came around, Queen had seen better days. They had seen better days, and so they get 21 minutes to perform, and they shocked the crowd. Talk about a feeding frenzy of people just eating up the performance of Freddie Mercury and the band. It brought Queen back to mainstream relevance, and put him back on top. It becomes doubly significant when you find out that ends up being one of their last performances, because Freddie Mercury would end up dying of AIDS a few years later. So I got a few more. Again, let me see you guys hit that reaction button. Yes, Live Aid. Live Aid. What did I say? Kool-Aid? Did I say lemonade? No, yeah, Live Aid, 1985. Um, uh, Let me know if there's any events that I haven't said yet. I got a couple more that you think should be added to this list of musical moments that affected our lives, that affected culture, that were significant in moving the world forward. Let me go. I got three more on my list. And again, you guys could agree, you could disagree. Um, but I think these are significant in themselves, right? So I'll do them I'll do these in chronological order. 1966, we have an event. It's actually a statement that gets said that destroys the image of a band, and starts to it starts to show a shift in consciousness of the nation and the nation's youth. It's John Lennon saying that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. And you start to see this, you know, you start to see this shift, this divide of young liberals who are pulling away from religion, pulling away from their families, and who are latching onto cultural icons, and this group of young conservative Christians who might have liked their music but are now taking a stance against what they're saying. And usually you had this battle between, adults and the youth of the world, and that's happened forever. I mean, you can go back to the 50s, again with rock and roll and African American music affecting conservative white America. But it's always an adult youth versus the adults, right? The wild, reckless youth against the older, conservative, square parents who just don't get it. You don't get it, Mom. You don't get it, Dad. You don't know what it's like to be young. But this is the first time, as far as I can tell, that you have that happening in the same peer group. You have a lot of conservative youths who are burning who are protesting the Beatles. They're burning their records. They're burning their magazines, which is shocking. Meanwhile, you have the Beatles, the spokespeople for an entire generation of music, who are going away from their boy band mop top lovable portrayal to now they're bearded. They're starting to experiment with things. And yes, Lawrence Welk did rock for his generation. But you get these guys who now they're growing facial beards. They're not wearing the mop top. They're letting their hair grow out. They don't have the mop tops. They got rid of the Nuru jackets, So yeah, they're getting away from this view of a Christian God and the popularity of religion, not the significant cultural impact of religion, but the popularity of it. And that again, another huge moment. The next one I'll talk about is something that we feel today. We're gonna feel it today at the halftime show, right? Of the big game. Uh, and that's 1980. The the Sugar Hill Gang in the song "Rapper's Delight" cracks the top 40, the Billboard top 40, the premier list of what is popular in in society, driven by the youth of the day. The Billboard top 40 is, and you have the first appearance of a hip hop song, of a rap song, "Rapper's Delight," Sugar Hill Gang, um, a musical movement coming out of the South Bronx. Um, uh, I was there. A lot of the things that you hear, and we just had the 50th anniversary of it last year, and a lot of the things that you hear about it, the block parties and the DJs playing in the streets and all that. I got to witness it. Um, it was an amazing time, and you can see it's amazing to be part of a generation or to be part of of a movement and see it at its grassroots. You know, it's like being it's like being in England doing punk. You know, or being in Seattle doing the grunge, the early years of grunge. You know, being in Detroit during the early years of Motown, to see this musical, um, to hear this musical style, and to see how it would eventually affect all culture, how its roots would spread out to touch all aspects of culture, the way we dress, the way we advertise and market, um, the way we develop style, the way we talk, all of these things um, came out of these different movements. And in 1980, hip hop got its got its hold on us with Rapper's Delight breaking the top 40. The last one that I'm going to mention about that I'm going to mention, and then I really hope you guys, for the last 10, 15 minutes that you guys are going to chime in here, because it's going to take me a few minutes to talk about this one. But the last thing that I've got is the year 2000, and there's been this little thing that came out that I remember using well. Oh my God, that I remember using it well, because this thing allowed me access to music that I hadn't heard in years. And it was a little peer sharing website called Napster. And Napster allowed us to share music, right? For me, it was wonderful because, again, after the invention of the CD, where a lot of physical album, a lot of LPs and 45 singles and all that stuff kind of went away, a lot of the early stuff didn't transition over to CDs. So there was a lot of music that we were not able to access. Well, Napster allowed you to upload music, right? So you could upload these songs that were only on records, and then share them with people. Yeah, and I am too. I'm proud to say that I was there for the early days of punk and metal and hip hop and disco, and new wave and grunge. Yeah, I've been around for quite a few. Yes, Napster made all of us pirates, Amanda, and and it was a free for all until Lars steps in, um, and and Metallica says no. No, we're going to sue you, Napster, for copyright infringement, for um for selling for putting our music out there and not compensating us. And so uh, so Metallica sues Napster for $10 million and essentially shut shuts down the site. You're not able to share music anymore. And in hindsight, it was the right thing to do. And I say that as a guy who downloaded hundreds of songs. I downloaded, I don't know, 10, 15 songs a day. Um, uh, just, as soon as I could remember a song, bam, got it. And and yeah, we look at it from the Metallica side, the greedy band that didn't need the money. But this didn't just affect Metallica or Madonna or the Rolling Stones or it didn't just affect any of those big bands. It affected little bands, small bands, bands who were one hit wonders, who it affected a band like Boston, decent band, had 3 albums out at the time. They needed that. The members of that band needed the residues from those, the residuals of those of those physical sales. And here was people sharing their stuff, passing it from person to person, and they're not making a penny. The band isn't making a penny. And to me, or let's look at any of the Motown groups, the Temptations, the Four Tops. Let's look at bands like Sly and the Family Stone. Let's look at artists um, like Johnny Cash. Okay, these are artists where a bunch of their stuff, the Wonders, yes, the Wonders, uh, but all of these bands, the one hit wonders, the bands that had 1 or 2 albums, who weren't getting much from the physical sales of their albums. Uh, um, but we're getting something. And now because of file sharing of sites like that, like LimeWire, you guys remember LimeWire? Um, now we're getting nothing. And the result of this action, while Metallica holds the for good or for bad, holds the mantle as the band that brought down Napster. Um, it was significant. It was significant for those bands who weren't Metallica, who weren't U2, who needed the sales. Um, you know, and um, and yeah, and Amanda, we all went crazy. So Amanda says I got caught with red wine. I didn't even like the song. Um, uh, I just went crazy. Yeah, we all did. Like I said, I was downloading songs I hadn't heard in years, but I was also downloading songs that I didn't even like, just because I could. And yeah, it definitely helped to speed about the introduction of viruses into computers. It's one of the reasons why I don't so much sweat my personal information, because I was on the internet when it really was the when I was on the internet, when all we did, we put out all our information out there, literally everything. uh, our socials, our birthdays, the number of people we slept with, any diseases we have, our addresses, the apartment that we lived in, when we were home. We put it all out there, man. And John comes out with a trivia. The first MP3 was Tom's Diner by Susan Vega, right? Susan, yeah. You know who made a lot of money from MP3s? Alanis Morissette. When she released her album, the MP3s were just getting ready to come out or had just come out, and she got offered a deal to get in on the ground floor of it, rather than take, cut back on her residuals, but she'll get X amount of shares of MP3s, and she took the shares, and she became a multimillionaire almost overnight. And I don't know if she still owns those shares or not, but good on you, Alanis, for doing that. So that's my list. Tell me some of the things that I might have left off the list. Tell me some of these significant musical events or events that happened in music that affected the world. We can open it up to things like the death of John Lennon in 1969, 1979, 1980, excuse me, 1980, when John Lennon dies and is murdered. And now the hopes and dreams of a ton of people are shattered, because you know what? The Beatles are never going to get back together again. And of course, he was the one who was advocating for peace. The whole world is over. Give peace a chance, and he's murdered. That's a significant thing that happens. The release of a song called Rocket 88 by Ike Turner. I don't know, it was 52 or 53. It's considered the first rock and roll song. It's a song that changes. It's a song that changes music, right? Going from jazz and big band into this whole new thing that's blues infused, because early rock and roll was very much blues infused. Multi-layered tracking. Multi-layering tracking was before the Beasties. I would say the significance of the Beasties, I think, or unless you're talking about multi-layering samples. If you're talking about samples, but there was multi-layered tracking existed before the Beasties. Maybe not at the level. We can talk about the grunge and gangster rap movement coming on the heels of an incredible time where music was extremely positive because of things again like the Berlin Wall coming down. There was a lot of hope in the world, and you get these two genres, gangster rap and grunge, which decided to shine a light on the ugly side of the world, and that really affects culture as we're coming out, adding a very negative, very depressing, ugly look at America, at the world. Let's not even call it America, but at the world. And it kind of puts a damper on this positive movement that the world is going through. And yes, sampling, not just and when it comes to sampling, who was it who was the first one to get sued? I can't remember who was the first hip hop artist to get sued for sampling. It was significant enough that they lost all of their of the money that they would have made. I know Vanilla Ice got sued for Ice Ice Baby, which famously used that sample of Under Pressure. But there were rap artists who lost everything, like every penny, because they didn't clear the samples. And one of the things about the Beasties was not only that they were sampling music, but it was the music they were sampling. You know, um, some deep, deep rock stuff. You know, um, and when they went from another thing about the Beasties was when they went, going from License to Ill to Paul's Boutique. How bizarre! He's the Biz Markie, was he the first? That he's the one who got sued for all the samples. Um, I'm not sure as to why you threw that name up there. Um, but how they went from uh, these white punk rockers who you want to talk about misogynistic, and you want to talk, and it's a word I don't like, but 100% when it came to License to Ill, the Beastie Boys were extremely misogynistic. No respect for women, very childish. To going to now they're, you know, incredibly respected. Their music is powerful. It's uplifting, positive. Yeah, that was a big change. So I don't know why you mentioned Biz. I'm going to assume you're mentioning Biz because of him getting losing all his money to the sampling. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's going to be about it. I want to thank the 7 people who gave me a reaction, and the 5 or 6 people who gave me comments to let me know that you guys were here. I know the Super Bowl's on. I know there weren't going to be a lot of people tuning in because they are interested in the game. Those of you who tuned in and are going to leave to go watch the game, I appreciate you. I really do. I hope you guys had fun. And I hope I was able to keep you interested and keep you entertained for the past hour and 12 minutes. So I'm going to wrap this up so that I can go. And I will see you guys next week. And until then, enjoy your week, guys. To my children, don't forget, Daddy loves you. Later, dudes, and Paisley on. Bye-bye.